And I kind of wanted to see if the AMC fans who've been listening this season would stick around.
Did they?
No. No.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, a track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context both historical and personal on some legendary bands. For our second season, we've picked none other than pioneering indie rockers, American Music Club.
Today on Backtracking, the Auctioneer, with his sassy smile and a little do-si-do, says everything must go into our deep re-listen of Mark Eitzel's 1998 solo release, Caught in a Trap, and I Can't Back Out, 'Cause I Love You Too Much, Baby. That's right. It's time for us to tackle the strange Siamese twin of Eitzel's 1997 release, West. So tell me, Dan, are you the trash?
I'm definitely not JW, and I think we'll all agree on that by the end of this episode. But first, we need to rejoin the tale of a solo Mark Eitzel already in progress. You might recall from episode 20 that, following his departure from American Music Club, Eitzel reset a number of things in his life. He got his financial situation in order and found a new manager. He also decided that he needed a change of scenery. So Mark rented out the house in San Francisco he'd purchased a few years before and decided to try out life in New York's most exciting city. No, not Buffalo. I'm talking about the Big Apple. And he was ready to take his bite. Eitzel was pleased.
And so were a number of New York indie rock luminaries, such as Yo La Tengo's James McNew and Sonic Youth's Steve Shelley. Following the second of his disastrous tours opening for the disinterested audiences of Everything But the Girl, Eitzel decided to record his latest material. It would be the follow-up to 60 Watt Silver Lining. After a false start with Third Eye Blind producer Jason Carmer, Eitzel wound up recording the tracks in the digital recording software Pro Tools on his own, a first for him. He enlisted the help of longtime friend and punk rock legend Kid Congo Powers, guitarist for The Gun Club, The Cramps, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, as well as McNew and Shelley. But before the project was buttoned up, Peter Buck came a-knockin'. The project that became West was then fast-tracked. While Eitzel thought West might be the one-off Matador project, the folks at his label sensed that the REM halo that Buck brought with him to the record could not be ignored. And so, West became the official big label follow-up to 60 Watt, and the tracks that would become the Matador record were Caught in a Trap. And they couldn't be released until after West came out, baby.
So what else was caught in a trap in 1998? Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky were caught in something of a little bit of a trap. And Elliott Smith is trapped in a big white tuxedo performing Miss Misery at the Oscars after it was nominated for Best Original Song. Russians are trapped in a financial crisis after the newly created Russian Federation defaults on both foreign and domestic debts, and Sergey Brin and Larry Page are trapped in a garage, founding the company that would become Google. J. William Hall, we're back.
We are indeed. I am grateful that you are feeling better. Our fans have been worried sick.
Well, listen, podcasting is serious business. It is dangerous business. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the fragile of skull, as I've learned this past few weeks.
The evidence is piling up. You know, podcasting is a brand new industry. We don't yet know what the pitfalls, what the pros and cons, how it's all going to play out, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Right now, one of the pros is that you become fabulously wealthy very quickly.
Yeah,
as we can. When you start a podcast, like it's a money machine.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a pro of podcasting.
Yeah.
A serious con is the damage that it does to your brain.
Yeah, it's a lot like playing in the NFL in that way. As soon as you start playing in the NFL, you're popping bottles, as they say, Jay William. You are popping bottles of, I don't know what do they pop the bottles of? It's a champagne, perhaps, a Cristal. Is that what it is?
Well, I think they're referring to pill bottles. You're popping.
Pill bottles.
Bottles.
Pill bottles. Okay, well, you're popping the bottle, but then obviously, the head. What do they call it? I know you're a big NFL fan,
I am.
Pittsburgh Steelers fan, as I recall.
That's right, Yins. If Yins all go down there over Pittsburgh and that up on Mount Washington, look over downtown, you see where the Steelers play down there now. That used to be over Three Rivers, but now they call it Heinz Field, but now it's like some kind of Acrisure. Anyway.
Well, as you know from your what is the crisis in the NFL that recently got all the coverage? The sustained head injury kind of situation.
Injuries. Yes, yeah. and sort of one of the interesting things that has happened since the CTE head injuries sort of became a big deal in the early 2000s is helmet technology has changed kind of dramatically. And so now it's like you can see like the helmets changing and becoming more like, and I guess head injuries supposedly are down and they supposedly, are catching them earlier and all of that. Still, you don't want to mess with your head, Dan, is what I'm trying to say to you. So
it's true.
Listen, I know, you want to go out on top. You want to go out a champion at podcasting.
Yeah, that's right.
But sometimes you got to know when it's time to hang up the cleats. You know what I mean?
Listen, it is not. I'm not going to let my injury knock me out of this game. Listen, I have more bands that I need to go deep on. I have just like all kinds of expansion plans for Backtracking. Unfortunately, Jay William, one of those experiments was last week. So last week had to take one more week off. My injury set us back a little bit. And so I thought, well, listen, I don't want to leave people without an episode at all. So I'll just do a real quick little intro and we'll re-release one of my favorite episodes from season 1. And we'll just see. We'll see if these American Music Club fans, these Mark Eitzel fans are as, open-minded to the coolest music as they purport to be. And I've got the data back, Jay William. And you know what that data says?
What does it say?
It says that American Music Club fans do not like the album Hemispheres. They don't like Rush, they don't like Hemispheres, and they don't like Roth's and my deep listening backtracking of that album. They listened to a very small percentage of the episode and then voted with their feet, and that was that.
I'm surprised because there are so many similarities between the two bands.
Let's start talking about those similarities, shall we? We've got
I think Mark Eitzel's voice is very unique, as is Geddy Lee's voice. Both very unique sounding voices.
True.
Guitar driven.
Yeah, you think? I don't know that I'd even say that American Music Club is guitar driven. And I'm not sure that I would say that about Rush either. But yeah, I don't know. Listen, we do have at least
You're
one.
The expert.
We have one fan out there who fan of both Rush and American Music Club. Very exciting. We're gonna come back to him in a few minutes. That is Judge Ken. Grand Island, New York denizen, or Grand Island, New York, proud son of Grand Island, New York. Grand Island, New York, of course, J. William Hall. Shall we talk about that just for a quick sidetrack on our backtrack?
Sure, I know nothing about it. It sounds like a kind of, ritzy sort of place. Grand Isle. It sounds like a daytime soap opera.
You'd be surprised. Isle. So this could be wrong. I'll double check this later, but my recollection is that Grand Island is the largest inland island in the United States.
Okay.
It is an island that sits on I believe it's the Niagara River between New York and Canada. So it basically it sits, on the border of the United States and Canada. The entirety of Grand Island, of course, as is our manifest destiny, belongs to the United States.
I gotta say, I'm a little concerned about the Grand Islanders who are going to be caught in the crossfire when the Great War with Canada breaks out.
Well, I'll tell you what, Grand Island may end up being a very strategic choke point. May also be completely strategically unimportant. I don't know, but I'm just surfacing the possibilities.
Every bit of soil,
must be
defended.
It must be
Yes.
taken. It must be taken. Listen, I'm going to be on the American side. I don't know if you're going to turncoat and fight for the Canadians, but I'm going to be, I'm not going to stop until I'm hoisting a flag in Saskatoon.
See, I don't identify so much with the country level as I do with the state level.
Oh, I see. So Pennsylvania or Ohio.
Well,
I mean,
Well, maybe that combined.
Well, so that's a difficult one. If in the Great Ohio-Pennsylvania War, who will you fight for?
Oh my God, this is impossible. I would have they tie a horse up to my hand and arm on the Pennsylvania side, and then they tie up a horse, to my arm and leg on the Ohio side, and just that would determine which side I'm on.
You would march.
Which side more of my entrails wind up on?
You would march between the two battle lines with a white flag on a long,
exactly.
And you just scream out like Bono. How long must I sing this song? I'm preparing to watch this Bono Surrender documentary that's on.
I'm definitely gonna watch that for sure.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I love this kind of thing, but I've got to say, Bono, especially nowadays, he definitely just teeters barely, between like very interesting and great stories and just like insufferable kind of, you know what I mean?
I think Bono has had one of the most interesting sort of career arcs in music. I think like U2 is a really unique band, unique story. I was a huge U2 fan of all of their 80s albums up through Joshua Tree. Still love them, still nostalgic about them. Like when they did the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary, like I was there,
Yeah.
But they did something that I think was artistically really brave.
Yeah.
Which is they completely upended their whole sound and style in sort of an ironic way.
Yeah, like that was like Zoo TV. Was that when that happened?
Yeah,
or somewhere
like
around then.
Achtung Baby and their 90s stuff, and they toyed with dance music and like and I think it was artistically really brave of them to do that, but I didn't like it at all. And so they kind of lost me there, and then they like sort of re-embraced their old sound. But I've just never, but I have friends who have like, are as into the new stuff as they are into like the older stuff or whatever. But I get why Bono gets under people's skin, but I still have a soft spot.
Yeah, I mean the earnestness is pretty intense, right?
Yeah.
And I do think as I've gotten older, as I'm exposed more and more to different generations, younger generations, I really do appreciate how strange our generation's allergy to earnestness is. It just does not seem to be a thing that any other generation alive today has as deeply and nearly universally generationally as Gen X does.
Well, but Mark Eitzel is extremely earnest.
He is absolutely earnest, but you can't deny that through his interviews, through the naming of songs, through the albums, there is that deep earnestness, but there is this kind of like punk rock unwillingness to fully embrace that. He'll write an incredibly beautiful, emotive, just completely earnest song, like, for example, Why Won't You Stay, right? What Holds the World Together, song like that. But then he'll kind of in an interview just be like, I suck. The song is about a taco I had. He'll do things like that clearly betrays this generational similarity that we all have, right? That discomfort with that.
Anti-commercialism. And I think U2, obviously, one of the big PR hits that they took was when they did that automatic download of this was like 2012 or something album, and everybody went apeshit angry about it. I was kind of like, I wasn't interested in listening to the album per se, but I didn't really care. It was a marketing gimmick. And man, did they catch so much flack for that. And I feel like that was the point where Bono's image became sort of encased in amber as this. I don't know, pompous, whatever. But I don't know. I still have a soft spot for him. I think he's just an interesting dude.
I mean, me too. The whole band, there's so much to like about the band. I think one of the things that's so likable and so admirable about them, although I am not a fan really, is that they did go through these phases actually very similarly to Rush, right? Rush did, had a very pronounced shift into this kind of 80s keyboard driven, frankly, kind of synth poppy music, right?
Yeah.
Had as much to do with, Thompson Twins as it did with Genesis there for a little while. And it is a highly kind of controversial shift in phase. And it sounds like similar to you too. There are a lot of people who are just kind of like, no, I like the prog rock kind of Led Zeppelin-y dork sci-fi stuff of early Rush. I can't get down for the, 1980s sport coat and, schlong haircut synth pop Rush.
Yeah.
Anyway.
For sure. I mean, anytime, the band's been around for what, 40 plus 45 years, U2. They're coming up on their 50-year anniversary. So, any band is going to go through phases.
Well, Jay William, why don't we go into our next phase? It is time for us to dig right into housekeeping. Before we get into Caught in a Trap, but I can't back out because I love you too much, baby, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing I want to cover here is just a general disclaimer for the rest of this season. We have now exited the phase of American Music Club and Mark Eitzel's careers where there is a book that we can lean on heavily for the biographical information. Sean Body's book ends right around the time of the release of West and Caught in a Trap. And, so for everything that happens from here on out, we are going to endeavor to be as biographically accurate as possible. I will certainly do as much work as I can do, online to try and piece together the narrative of what's happening in these later years of the band. But it's going to be, I am not going to do the same amount of research as like a Ken Burns might do. So don't expect anything that's as exhaustive. And I may have some factual inaccuracies. I'll do my best, but I would love for all of you listeners out there to feel free to write in with anecdotes, corrections, help with the factual narrative so that it'll at least be captured somewhere for posterity. Make sense, Jay William?
I agree with you 1,000%.
We are moving into uncharted territory. This week for Jay William marks the first of the albums we'll be covering that he has never heard before. I have heard Caught in a Trap before, but once we move past that this album, I think both of us are going to be in a
we're going to be caught in a trap.
Yeah,
right?
Of albums that we haven't heard before, but we will backtrack for you, baby. Second bit of housekeeping. So Jay William, in our I believe it was the last episode. You're going to have to help me with this. Might have been the first episode on West. You had said that one of the songs that we were discussing reminded you of a yacht rock tune. And you were able to sing the tune, but you couldn't remember the song. And then I actually recognized the melody from you humming it, but I couldn't think of it at the moment either. Couple weeks later, I'm on injured reserve as one does. I was listening to some yacht rock
and some mental reps.
That's right. The song came on, and it is, of course, the song "Hearts" by Marty Balin.
That is, yeah. You texted me when you found it, and I was just like, "What?" Like, as soon as it started, because I did not know who Marty Balin was.
Yeah, kind of a controversial but incredibly, I think, influential figure in early rock and roll. He, of course, was one of the members of Jefferson Airplane. He was the kind of one of the singers along with Grace Slick. One of the songwriters for the band. He might have been the primary songwriter for the band, but then became kind of the key figure in the Jefferson Starship, then on to Starship era of the band, and then around the yacht rock era, did some solo work, and the song "Hearts" was one of his. I'll plug in a little snippet of the song so we all can just know what we're talking about. Okay, so there it is. Jay William, Hearts, Marty Balin.
So I want to point out the San Francisco connection. So, Jefferson Airplane got their start in San Francisco, the late 60s. AMC, 15 years later or whatever, they're in San Francisco. Is it a coincidence that the melody of that song off of West, or not the melody, the vibe, immediately reminded me of this yacht rock song written by a San Franciscan? I think something's happening here is what I'm saying.
Why don't we just throw that out there to the universe, and we'll see if anybody picks that up and picks it up and runs with it. Okay.
Sounds
all
good.
right. Next bit of housekeeping. Just wanted to mention really quickly, listener Keith sent us a lovely email. Really just outlining an exchange that he had with Sean Body around the time when Sean Body's book was being released. It was actually a couple of anecdotes that he shared around this book, but I think the bottom line here is that he expressed his appreciation for Sean Body writing such a relatively exhaustive biography of the band that we all like so well. And just kind of saying R.I.P. Sean Body, who died not too long after that book was written. So unfortunately, he's been passed away for quite a while. So thank you, Keith, for sharing that. And finally, our friend, I mentioned him earlier, Judge Ken. Judge Ken wrote in to first share a live performance. After we had talked about West, I think he felt like it would be useful for us to check out a live performance of one of the songs that he found that I think he kind of suggested was maybe a stronger defense of the album. Strong defense of an album that maybe we were a little bit negative on. I did watch the performance. I would say it was a somehow heavier, more rocking performance of In Your Life than what is maybe found on the album. So I do think it was a good live performance, good live sound, very interesting to hear Eitzel in that kind of an environment. But I'm not gonna go so far as to say that my mind was changed about West. I still just kind of feel like West, in retrospect, was a bit of a half-baked effort, and it wasn't quite the chocolate and peanut butter. Eitzel and Buck were not chocolate and peanut butter. It was more of, maybe peanut butter and mustard or something.
Peanut butter and mustard?
Yeah, just not an inspired combo. I get it. You might think maybe that's a bad metaphor. You might think they'd go together like chocolate and peanut butter, but when the combination actually happened, you're like, this is not really the chocolate and peanut butter.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I think that you loaned me the Sean Body book, so I've been saying for all the episodes up to now, like, well, I don't have the book, so I don't read whatever, but now I have the book, and so I was particularly trying to look up stuff about this whole era, and it basically confirms that the thing with Buck sort of came up suddenly, and Eitzel already had Caught in a Trap, or a version of it was
pretty
ready.
well in the bag. Yeah.
He had already recorded the stuff with the New York indie rock guys.
Yeah.
And so then the thing with Peter Buck came up, and it was fast tracked, and that threw that together. And then the record label was like, we're gonna, send them out. And so they were doing like, there are these clips of them performing songs from West. And, I will say, because I saw some of those when I was researching the album, that they did help me appreciate the songs more. Like I liked, like In Your Life, I thought, like sounded much, punchier and bigger, like with that band, because it was basically Tuatara. That was his touring band. And, so I actually agree with our writer who, it elevated the album for me somewhat.
Yeah.
I think that the songs are just, and Eitzel, like, or, the Sean Body book says, like, Eitzel was like, hey, Buck's coming in and he knows guys and he's going to put together the band and we're doing this, and I'm just going to ride the wave, And so like the chord progressions and all of that kind of stuff, they do. And it said a couple of the songs were actually, they were originally REM like demos that.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah. That, or something that he had demoed for REM for their recent album, and it didn't make the cut, And so, I think that the whole thing just happened so fast, but it's a very different vibe, obviously.
Different.
And then he came back and recorded like the solo acoustic stuff for Caught in a Trap. Happened, I believe, after the Peter Buck era.
Okay. All right. So listen, that actually fits together with the last bit of housekeeping, the last comment that I did want to throw out there from Judge Ken. He, as we were kind of going back and forth about West, he kind of said, Caught in a Trap is one of those albums that I kind of just got lost in the shuffle for me for whatever reason. And I'm sympathetic to that. It does feel to me like an album that for whatever reason just didn't quite, it wasn't instantaneously memorable for me just as an album that existed as many of the other albums, even West, which is an album that, again, I don't really love all that much. But he had said, it's been a while since I've listened to it, but my recollection is it really feels to me like 2 EPs more than a single LP. I had a similar feeling, and what you just said, Jay William, about it being recorded in 2 phases somehow explains that a little bit. What do you think about that commentary from Judge Ken?
I agree 100%. Like, because, in my revised vision of this, it would be 2 EPs. Because he did the session with those New York guys, and that's like, I forget if it's 5 songs. And then and I think there were a couple of leftovers, because the other thing that we have to talk about is this Lover's Leap USA CD of demos and outtakes that he was giving or selling on tour.
Yeah.
Have you listened to it yet?
I haven't. I actually think
Okay.
we've got to cover. We should cover it in a separate episode because I haven't.
Oh yeah.
I know that there's some, at least one song that appears on both records.
Just one.
Yeah. So, and it is kind of contemporaneous with this and West, I know as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really like, I mean, the West thing is separate and it's its own thing, but Lover's Leap and Caught in a Trap are born from the same pool of stuff, and there's some stuff on Lover's Leap that was clearly like a full band thing, and so I don't know if that was also the New York guys or who it was, but like we have to cover it because there's some great stuff on there, and I think it's just an interesting companion to Caught in a Trap.
Yeah. Well, I think there is a lot to dig into with this album.
Yes.
But why don't we cover the basics, then we can really dig in. But I think there's a lot really to discuss with this album. So it was released, as you said, it was recorded prior to West, or at least partially recorded prior to West, but was not released until about roughly 6 months later, January 20th, 1998. West was released in mid-97. The runtime of, and it was released on Matador. So this was the Matador release after all. It was the first of Eitzel's Matador records, although I do believe that a number of the later Eitzel AMC, I think some of the later records are on Matador as well. I'm not certain about that, but I think so. Runtime, 41 minutes and 45 seconds. That is it. Now, Jay William, I want to start with the cover.
Yeah.
Okay, the first thing, a little disappointing. I looked at this cover. I cannot find a credit for the cover anywhere. I don't have a physical copy of this, and I was not able to find a credit listed on any of the normal websites for who created this cover. Looking at it, though, I suspected it was another Gene Lowe painting, similar to Everclear, similar to San Francisco, similar to Love Songs for Patriots. But I was not able to confirm that. I even reached out directly to Miss Gene Lowe a week and a half or 2 weeks ago and didn't hear back, unfortunately. So, but I suspect this is a Gene Lowe painting.
Really? Like what?
Yeah. You don't think so?
Well, I'm not 100% sure. This is the vibe I'm getting, or this is the story I've concocted in my head.
Okay.
Because I did a Google image search on the cover, and of course, like all that came up was, stuff about the album. But on some release or something, it zoomed out a little bit more, and you can actually see the frame that's around it, and it looks like it's this framed picture that's on a wall somewhere.
Kind of like a gold filigree almost. Frame.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, like, could this be something hanging in a bar, or it seems like the type of painting where if you had this sort of like out of nowhere sort of folk arty looking painting of an old police officer smiling, somebody would buy that and hang it in like a bar or something. It would be just this cool kitschy kind of image. That's the story I've concocted. I don't immediately see a lot of similarities between this painting and Gene Lowe's work, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
Okay. So I am going to make a counter argument. Again, this is pure speculation. The painting style, I will say, reminded me a little bit of Gene Lowe in that it has that similar subtle kind of creepiness, I guess, is what I'd say. And I also, the second bit of evidence, again, very flimsy, is exactly what you said. It is the fact that there is this, in some of the other art that you find promotional art for this album, you see kind of more of the painting, and there's this like gold filigree border around it, right? Mm-hmm. That border reminded me slightly of the border that appears around the Everclear cover painting and the San Francisco cover painting, right? Okay. She paints a border around her paintings, at least on the other two albums that we know that she did at this point. Mm-hmm. That may be totally coincidence. It may be a graphic design choice that was done by whoever did the promotional art, but that was my second bit of information. Now, the third bit is somewhat controversial, but I feel like I need to bring it up. We're going to have to talk about Mark's unibrow, and we're going to have to talk about this painting's unibrow. So one of the most, I think, iconic things about Mark Eitzel's look, there's the hats that he took to wearing at some point along the career, right? That became kind of those kind of pork pie type hats that he would wear. That became kind of an iconic thing. The other thing, and I think we just have to talk about it within the context of this album cover, is that he has a fairly pronounced unibrow. He has his eyebrows connect above his nose, right? Not an unusual thing to have happen.
Nothing
in the world.
To be ashamed of.
Nothing. We all have our own little things like this, and that just happens to be his. However, I will say it's much more common to pluck the hairs of your to artificially separate the two eyebrows. That is something that I would say most or many people who have that will choose to do, right? They'll do a little bit of plucking and they'll kind of minimize that. I don't know. I have no inside information here, but I feel as though that is something that Eitzel has never chosen to do. He has always kind of worn his unibrow proudly. It's right out there up front. And this painting has an obvious pronounced unibrow. And I don't think that this painting would have been selected for this cover if it were not that didn't happen coincidentally, right? Well, yeah. Somehow this is a joke or a nod or whatever.
It does sort of vaguely resemble Eitzel, because I remember when it came out, I was like, at first I was like, wait, is that a painting of him wearing like a police uniform? I don't think it is, but like I think it's close enough, and probably because of like the unibrow or whatever. I mean, the effect of the whole thing is just really funny. Like it's sort of this absurdist. This old timey folk art looking police officer smiling very big, juxtaposed with the title, which is, obviously from the Elvis Presley Suspicious Minds. Yeah. And, and because I think I also was like, wait, is that Elvis? Like at one point I thought maybe that was Elvis Presley on the cover, but I don't think it is. Like, I think it's either a painting, maybe Gene did paint it, and somehow a conversation happened where they're like, oh, it looks like Mark or whatever, and he was like, oh, that's awesome, I'm gonna use it. Or he saw it, or somebody saw it in a bar or whatever, and they were like, oh, look at that, it looks like you. And so I do think that there is that kind of similarity there. And then with the Elvis long title, but then like the content of the album, because this is a dark album, and so that image and title juxtaposed with the actual content of the album is just, it's interesting. Like I think it has a really interesting effect.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could be wrong, but I think I think that you're right about this. I think that there was quite a bit of a wink around the title and the cover of this album. It really, for me, kind of speaks to Eitzel's self-effacing sense of humor, which I do think is, non-trivial. I think he definitely can be pretty funny pretty frequently. But why don't we get into the content of the album? To your point, it is a dark record. So producer, really, it's just kind of Eitzel is the producer here. I have to say, I'm just going to dive into it. I had a strange experience listening to this one. I had not listened to it in many, many years. Although when it came out, I listened to it quite a bit. I wouldn't say that it was in like super heavy rotation, like when I first kind of fell in love with Everclear. Like that was in super heavy rotation for years. But this I listened to quite a bit, but I just had not even put it on in probably 15 years, right? And my first 2 listens were not like revisiting an old friend at all. Whereas like going back to, Engine for the first time in a long time definitely felt like kind of revisiting an old friend. This one I was like, gosh, I don't really like this. I kind of don't remember these songs, and it just wasn't clicking for me. On the 3rd and 4th listen, it completely clicked for me. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this was a great album. It kind of challenged me a couple of times, but gosh, I really, by the end of like covering this record, doing all my notes on it and everything, I'd listened to it quite a lot. I really felt pretty much universally positive about this one.
I agree with you. And now, of course, this was the first time I ever listened to the album. Like, for whatever reason, I missed it back then, and I never caught up. And, so coming off of West, even though I know, like, the timeline is screwed up because, some of this, or I think, all of these songs, well, I don't know if they all are or not, but much of the album predates West.
But tight, right? I mean, really, like, it predates West a little bit, but this was all kind of happening within the same 2 or 3 year period, right? A lot of this writing, certainly all the recording, which I think is in and of itself kind of interesting. But
I think the difference with West is just that, like, the songs, because they were Peter Buck's sort of like music, and the lyrics were more just quick and dirty, like just pulling stuff out. Like there wasn't as much time spent in developing those songs, but these ones are classic Eitzel solo. To me, it was really refreshing to hear like the first 4 or 5 songs on this album that are just him and guitar. It was almost like listening to like a sequel to Songs of Love, but it's a different batch of songs. And I think there's a lot of greatness in a lot of these songs. I know that Sean Body was really critical of this album in the book. He was kind of like, these songs are undeveloped, and his favorite stuff was the stuff that Eitzel did with the New York indie guys. But and while I think some of those songs are really good, on the whole, I'm digging the stark, just his voice and guitar, or sometimes it's 2 guitars or whatever. But, I thought that it was refreshing to hear that again after, not that, West is overproduced or whatever, but 60 Watt, it's pretty produced. Like there's a lot of instrumentation and stuff there. And then West, there's a lot of layers and, but, just to go back to like the stark, like it sort of reminded me of like, this is an element that the AMC fans who fell in love with California, that's what they love,
I completely agree. I will tell you the specific AMC album that this reminded me of most upon kind of like listening a number of times, United Kingdom. I think it has this, for me, number one, I think the production on this album is just about perfect. It is not overdone at all. Like it just isn't trying that hard, but it really captures like the intimacy of Eitzel on Songs of Love, but also a little bit of that raw atmospheric stuff that I think was happening around United Kingdom, where they wasn't quite so clean because they didn't have quite as much time to record it, and it was kind of thrown together from a couple of different sources. But for me, somehow or another, that album feels really kind of fresh and interesting, especially in contrast to California. I have a very similar feeling about this one. It felt to me like an AMC album when they weren't trying quite so hard. And what I mean by that is and it is maybe controversial, can debate me on it, but I feel like actually a number of the AMC albums, if I'm being honest, their weakness is that they feel like they're trying a little bit too hard. I think that's true on California. I think it's true on San Francisco. It's definitely true for me on Mercury. It just feels like they're really putting a lot of effort into trying to make this sound like...
Well, yeah, effort into the production.
Production, exactly.
This is a lot of production,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think this has that, and I think it gives it this really kind of, I don't know, raw beauty. I was surprised at how much I liked this album after going through that kind of listening process.
Yes. Having said that, I would say there are two different EPs kind of on this album. Obviously, the stuff he does with the full band sonically sounds different, than the solo acoustic kind of stuff. So, Sean Body liked the band stuff. I personally like the solo acoustic stuff a little better. I feel like the band stuff is good, and there are a couple songs that I really like, but I think it suffers a little bit from, because this might contradict what you're saying a little bit. Like AMC, their stuff felt developed, like they really spent a lot of time developing it and honing their parts and getting the dynamics and everything. And that's what, elevated it like to a different level. And then this stuff is kind of like, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, it's all right.
This one, these guys kind of just, it's like they learned the song and sort of like ran through it a number of times and then just laid it down, and that's kind of it. Yeah. And
more like a 60
it's a little more
watt.
samey.
Yeah, but there's definitely a looseness in the band that isn't the thing that I love about it, but I do like this album overall. Here's what I'm going to say. It's a little bit different. I think we're going to have a disagreement, but an interesting one. I definitely can hear the 2 EP argument on this album. It's pretty clear. However, I think the sequencing of these tracks really solves that problem, if you were to see that as a problem. I think emotionally and from an energy perspective, he builds in a really interesting way just through track sequencing into the band songs, and then the band songs kind of like recede back out into the last few solo songs in a way that I like. I actually think the sequencing of this album, in my opinion, is really thoughtful and something that, honestly, I love. It took me a little bit to kind of wrap my head around it, but I really, at the end of it, I feel really good about it. And I think this band, if we're going to talk about the band for just a quick second, I have to say, you know this, I don't like punk. I have never liked punk. I don't. It's just
you're too much of a conformist. You're too much of a conformist. You're afraid of anarchy.
I just never got into punk. I don't really. It is just not a touchstone for me. It never has been, right? And so Kid Congo Powers is not somebody that I knew who he was, although clearly he's, a luminary in kind of the punk community, and has certainly played in bands that I've heard of, and in at least the case of Nick Cave, a band that I like pretty well. But I just like that background, the Sonic Youth stuff. I don't, never really got into that. So none of these players individually I would like, if I saw them playing on somebody's record, I'd be like, ooh, I got to pick that up. That's going to be interesting. That said, somehow Eitzel and his post-punk, he was clearly punk and then, kind of moved in a different direction. It seems as though they fit in a way that the 60-watt players, for example, just didn't fit. And I don't think the West players fit at all. I love this band for him. I really do. I just was like, fuck, I really think these guys click with him. Their chemistry is like really good. And one of my notes was like, God damn, like if this album was like this band plus Bruce Caffin, I would just be like in all day long. I really felt like, especially from a guitar perspective, the stuff that Kid Congo Powers did on this record, it was in some ways Voodoo-like, but
yes,
worked super well for me.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment, because that's what I noticed as well, is that his guitar parts are Voodoo-esque. And I don't know if there's some actual connection between them because they're both West Coast, coming up around the same time. I don't know. But they both approach their parts in a similar way, where it's this like atmospheric, a lot of controlled distortion and that kind of stuff. And his guitar parts stand out on these songs. I think that the other two guys, the bass and the drums, not that they sound bad, they sound like perfectly good, but like they don't stand out. Like, to me, like it feels a little more reserved, a little safer, a little like, we're just gonna kind of keep this groove going and not like take it way up or down with our parts, and that's not criticism or whatever. I'm sure they had, scant time to kind of like figure all this out. So, but that's the difference between like AMC, where they were like workshopping and touring and, playing these songs over and over and figuring everything out. I feel like all of these bands with Eitzel have been these sort of like ragtag, we're grabbing some guys from over here and putting them together. And, even though the 60-watt band, I thought there was a lot to be like, I liked more of that than I guess I expected to. It was his jazz foray or whatever.
Yeah.
Peter Buck's band, different sound, kind of got their own thing going, but this one is distinct and different, and probably, like the most appropriate for Eitzel songs to, post AMC.
Yeah. Totally agreed. Okay. So are we ready to dig into the individual tracks here?
Yeah, I've been ready.
All right, well then let's do it. Side A, track 1, Are You the Trash, Jay William? We're going to find out in about 1 minute and 54 seconds. Let's go.
He's always giving you free advice on ways you can avoid telling him no. The game of survival, some play it far too well. So much hate to make.
Okay. So why don't we start with the lyrics, as always. I'll start this one. You can start the next one. How about that, Jay William?
Yeah, it sounds fair.
Okay. So this feels to me a little bit like another entry in the mini genre of Eitzel songs, that I'm going to call the You're So Vain genre, where it feels to me like Eitzel is writing about the ex-boyfriend or current boyfriend or girlfriend of a friend. And so he's kind of like, Aspirin is like this. Ex-girlfriend is a little bit like this, but that was what I took from these lyrics.
Yes, it appears that it feels like he's singing to a woman about like an ex-boyfriend who's abusive or something.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, I didn't know if like she's a prostitute or something like that, or is this a more general statement about the patriarchy?
Yeah.
But it's not specific enough to identify the exact people, but that seems to be the general tone. Like, he's commenting on something going on with this friend, or who knows.
Yeah. Now this is so I think we're in agreement. It is a set of lyrics that I feel like contains tremendous anger, and but it's anger that is coming from that place of love, right? It's that defensive anger that you might find in someone like, you're my friend and your
somebody did you wrong
sucks.
and I've got your back, and
so it's angry, but it's angry on behalf of someone. So I think that was nice. But moving on to the music a little bit for me, odd opener. I actually think this is probably my biggest quibble with the album overall. I don't like this as an opener, and I don't think I really like it on the record. It's a very short song, only less than 2 minutes long, but the music is kind of bouncy, even kind of cheery, and that musically is pretty dissonant from the lyrics. Now that's not something that Eitzel is afraid of. He's done that, I think, many times over the course of his career. But I don't know. In this one, it just kind of feels a little bit out of place on what I've come to think of as a very sparse, very slowcore album.
Yeah, this one definitely has the jauntiest sort of like, it's just that like staccato plucking, like real softly. I do think there's something to be said. You were talking about the flow of the album and how it kind of like this is the starting point of the album, and it starts in this kind of like quiet, tentative, sounding way. And I think it does sort of build in intensity, like with each song. And this is the lightest, the lightest song of this first batch, the first side of the album or whatever. And, or at least it feels that way musically. Like lyrically, you're right. Like this is, the singer is angry in this song. But the chords are kind of like major sounding chords. Like they sound like more upbeat, so it does sort of, it's a mishmash. You're not sure how to feel.
It's if you just listen to this track, it's hard to know where this album is going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because it's so short, it's sort of like an appetizer, Like,
it feels like a prelude.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so all right, that was pretty quick. Do you want to dig into another one?
Yeah.
Track two. All right, already track 2. We are ready. We are ripping. We are tearing through Caught in a Trap. XMas Lights Spin, 4 minutes and 43 seconds. Shall we?
We shall.
Next to an old doorway with a dark history of being left open. St. Nicholas.
Okay, Jay William. Why don't we get into the lyrics? It's your turn. Take us on a lyrical journey, my friend.
So I'm not, I don't know what this song's about exactly, but, trying to make sense of it and trying to kind of like figure out, like, it seems to tell the story of, if not Santa Claus himself, it could be somebody dressed as Santa Claus. It's something happening during a Christmas party or something where, but I also was like, could it just be like he saw like somebody out on the street who maybe had a Santa hat on and was just sort of out of control a little bit. It's a very, this song surprised me. This was the first song, like I agree, the opener, I was kind of like, I didn't have strong feelings about it. But this one, as the song goes on, this is a very quietly epic song. It has a lot of different sections to it. It's just him and guitar, close mic'd voice. He's spinning out this tale of somebody either dressed as Santa or Santa himself. But also there's, this quote from King Lear. Did you?
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this whole thing is it's very poetic and very kind of epic. And I really like the chorus is sort of a strong chorus on this one. Like you don't even realize it's a chorus the first time he sings it, but then it comes back, the whole Saint Nicholas,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I like this one a lot. I can't tell you exactly what it's about, but there's a lot of cool imagery, and it seems like somebody spiraling out of control at Christmas time. But who that person is, I don't know.
Yeah, listen, this was a very tough one for me to parse as well, to kind of piece together like a specific narrative or even like a specific sentiment. But so I think generally it was primarily just an imagistic song. The first verse for me paints this evocative New York City picture. Now I may be kind of like I may be overly influenced by knowing that Eitzel had spent some time in New York around this time, and I may be kind of like overly.
No, actually, New York makes sense now because I was searching like where in San Francisco does 1st and 7th crisscross, and they don't. And so I was like, like I don't know what so now that it's like, yeah, okay, he's in New York, he's not in San Francisco.
Yeah, I didn't do that, but I just somehow, for whatever reason, I figured out that, or I thought that, this must be kind of more of a New York thing. I am not sure that the Christmas, that Christmas and Santa really are literally a part of this story at all. They're more of a sense of, being abandoned or something. But one image in this, in these lyrics that I love, there's this in the first verse, there's this like what I think of as a New York City image, which is there's this line where he talks about a man, quote, kind of doing an imitation of Satan.
Yeah.
And I really like that verse. And it talks about this door. And then it goes into this door with a dark history of being left open. And that dark history of being left open, I think of as like the pre-chorus kind of verse chorus bridge line that leads us into that little bit of a chorus that you were just talking about. And I just imagined this, like him writing this about like a homeless person or a drug addict or a crazy person or something, on the street doing an imitation of Satan. But it really, and the next line is kind of like, it wasn't really, he actually was a broken angel or something. That's a little bit more sympathetic. And I love this image of a song that's like dark history, this door, dark history of being left. I just think that's very evocative. And I love that to shift into the music. I love that musical line. It's so memorable, so kind of eerie, and bridges into that chorus perfectly in my opinion. That's my favorite part of the song without a doubt.
Yeah, I got hooked during the second verse of the song because it becomes very hypnotic. It's like an extra long kind of verse, and he's sort of, a lot of the style of the guitar on this album, the solo, it's these sort of acoustic finger-picked things that he's playing sort of. It's not a loop, but it sounds kind of like a loop because it's just like this figure that he plays over and over and sings over. And the second verse of this song goes on like longer than expected, but it becomes more and more kind of like intense. I'm reading through the words here. I don't know. There's just a lot of cool images in it. Xmas lights, and then there's a nurse that.
Yeah.
It takes a nurse to ease you into your surrender. She smiles because she knows you won't remember. Each line kind of connects to the next one, and it's hypnotic, and then it also has a very distinct bridge. And the chord changes, like this is like this feels like Mark Eitzel classic, like it's an alternative tuning, and he's just doing some unusual chords and stuff. And a song like this is you would not hear. I mean, there was nothing on West, or 60. Well, maybe on 60 Watt there might have been some stuff that was a little more this kind of meditative sort of feel. But I think this is a great song. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, this song, it's so funny that you brought up the bridge. I did as well. It really struck me. I think many of these songs, again, feel like, from a songwriting perspective, like a throwback to the first 3 American Music Club albums, where they tend to have much less of that traditional pop verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? Mm-hmm. Like kind of structure. Mm-hmm. They rarely had that, and sometimes there wasn't really any meaningful differentiation between any of those parts. This one is kind of interesting, and I feel like a lot of this album is like that. This one has this much more traditional, at least relatively traditional, pop song structure that's noticeable, and the bridge is definitely an important part of that here. Yeah, I like this. This isn't one of my favorite songs on the album, but I think it's a big jump from Are You the Trash to this. This probably would be the song that I would open the album with if I was to retrack this.
Interesting.
Okay. All right, so are we ready to move on to number 3?
Yeah.
You are? Nothing else you need to get out? All right, let's do it, man. Let's do it. Auctioneer's song. It is 4 minutes and 8 seconds. Why don't we give it a listen?
The auctioneer in his black chapeau says everything must go.
All right. This is, in my opinion, the first knockout on this album. I think this song is an absolute knockout. Lyrically, this is Eitzel. In my opinion, this is Eitzel 100% on his game. I love these lyrics. This is classic Eitzel. It is a picture, in my opinion, of really, in the beginning, a picture of depression, right? Holding him down on his bed, then the snowman and disdain, that whole verse where he's like, there's just like, it just feels like these kind of like metaphors that are primarily just about kind of depression. That was my interpretation. But then you go into these auctioneer choruses that are just so evocative. They're creepy. They're kind of scary even, And that everything must go refrain is just classic Eitzel, where he writes these really interesting verse lyrics, seizes on a totally memorable, very familiar phrase, and kind of uses that in a way that's incredibly emotionally evocative in the most musically memorable section of the song.
Yeah, I think this song is definitely... What's that?
I was going to say you're speechless. You're just speechless. You're speechless from my assessment of those lyrics.
Yes, so my interpretation was slightly different. I thought that maybe he was actually, drawing a metaphor from actually experiencing, like, I forget what the timeline is of, when maybe his parents had died previous to that, but being at the phase of life that we're in, and you're thinking about your parents and at some point, like when both parents are gone or whatever, then you have to do something with all of the stuff, and it's like,
oh yeah,
I feel like he's making this just sort of like larger observation about how, like, basically it's like a George Harrison all things must pass sort of statement, where like everything must go, eventually, you, me, everything. And the auctioneer is sort of like this, he elevates the auctioneer to this sort of like mildly sinister person who is sort of like the conduit that like keeps that train rolling, basically.
Yeah, like a Grim Reaper, really, right?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, sort of. This is a really well crafted lyric, like
great.
Not that, not that the other songs that are more stream of consciousness feeling, like those are great, images and stuff too. But this one actually is like has sort of a message, that you grasp, and it's kind of like, ooh, and it the music really complements and supports the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, to your point though, it is there are certain Eitzel songs that feel a little bit more spoken wordy, you know what I mean, right? And that can work in a really interesting way. There's a lot of those in the catalog. This definitely fits a little bit more into the kind of tightly crafted Eitzel tunes, in my opinion. On the music, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to kind of call out. This song musically is in my opinion that magic that Eitzel can sometimes capture when it's just him and a guitar, right? This is what Godzilla said to God when it's just him and a guitar on Songs of Love Live, right? Where it really is just like, God, I can't imagine a full band version of this song that could do it any better, because he just like reaches these incredibly high emotional peaks, I think, being able to perform it on his own. So I love that. Second thing I want to kind of call out, and you talked about it a little bit already, what I really appreciated on these songs across this album, but there are a few mixed in here that highlight it, especially this being one of them, is Eitzel's guitar playing, right? You really don't think of, or I don't think of Eitzel as like, his guitar playing as being the thing about him. It's mostly like he plays guitar so he can perform or so he can sing. But I love his guitar playing on a few of these songs. It's just really interesting, very clean, like really good. This isn't just somebody strumming chords on an acoustic guitar, anymore. Like maybe it might have been early on in his in his career. This is, I think, really interesting, cool stuff.
I would agree. His guitar playing is really unique and interesting, and especially with the alternative tunings that he does. And, he commands a room with just him and a guitar. And there's a reason for that. It isn't just like him strumming, he does these kind of like complicated sounding picking patterns and whatever. And this is a great entry in the Mark Eitzel catalog.
Yeah, the last thing I want to highlight about this one musically before we move on is there is a specific chord progression as we move from the verse into the chorus here. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's happening exactly, but it is such an earworm for me. I don't know if he shifts like modality. I really don't know what's going on, and I'm not enough of a guitar player at all to really even have a sense of it, but there's something that's being done from the verses into the chorus here that is just a complete earworm for me. I can like hear it right now. It is super interesting and memorable, and I love it.
It's pretty simple. He's basically just going from a seventh to a suspended. I don't know what he's doing.
All right. So listen, shall we move on to White Rosary?
Yes, we shall.
Okay. So White Rosary, it is 3 minutes and 52 seconds. Why don't we give it a listen?
A little girl with a white rosary, a call into heaven to take her away from the trap that life turned out to be, from the trap she only wanted Jesus to see. 'Cause you're you're damned by the things you don't see.
All right. White Rosary. Jay William, why don't you take us on a lyrical journey?
You know, I would say, okay, so each song in this first sort of suite of songs, you know, because all of these songs sonically, I mean, it sounds like him and a guitar just running through songs.
Yeah.
But it's like each song gets incrementally sadder, darker, starker. Like it's, you know, because that first one has almost like a major sounding, like bright sound to it. I mean, even the lyrics are dark, but then it kind of like gets, each song gets successively like lower and lower, just sort of like mood wise.
Yeah.
This one, some of the imagery in it, I noticed it's like sort of this religious imagery and shadows and storm. And it's like, this one is arguably goth. Like if you just took the lyrics from this and you know, had Bauhaus come up with the backing track, like, you know, this is like a goth Mark Eitzel song, and I think it's the darkest of this first stretch of songs on the album.
Yeah.
What is that? For some reason,
what's that Nico record? Is it called the Marble Index?
Oh yeah.
No, I think you're right. I mean, it definitely has a bit of that, you know, very goth feel. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if this song is a Kathleen song or not. Is for some reason I'm getting those vibes.
Yeah, you know, so I've, as we talked about up front, because this is not really covered all that much in the Sean Body book, I did a little bit of digging around and just trying to find random articles that had been written around the time that this album was released to see, you know, what sources I could find to figure out if, you know, there's really any information you can find about what these songs are about. There was at least one article that I found that talked about one of these songs definitely being a Kathleen song, but that was not taken from like a Mark Eitzel quote. It was just kind of the reviewer saying that's, so that might have just been their interpretation. It was not this song though. Now, I will say this is definitely a San Francisco song, meaning the setting is San Francisco. They talk about the I-280 on-ramp lights here. The I-280 is, of course, a main thoroughfare through the city of San Francisco. It's kind of one of the primary ways in and out of the city by like highway. So I feel pretty confident it takes place in San Francisco. But beyond that, I have no idea whether this little girl is a metaphor, whether it's a real person, who this girl with the white rosary is. Could certainly be Kathleen, but I don't feel confident claiming that. Certainly,
are
my
rosaries typically white? Is that a thing?
This could be why they didn't pick me for Pope, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They've got white rosaries. Okay. I just Googled it. I also was not qualified for Pope.
Yeah, it was I did have my fingers crossed that I might get the call up, but not being Catholic might have been a strike against.
Is that a disqualification in this day?
Well,
and
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's allowed, but listen, they didn't tell me it wasn't. They didn't say to me, "We're not picking you for Pope because you're not Catholic." So, I guess I can't know for sure, but listen, I suspect. Because what other reason can you think of why I wouldn't have been picked as Pope?
I think you would have made a really good Pope.
Listen, I would have been very. Well, listen, we'll see how this guy does. We'll see how he does. But just, I want him to know, Pope, what's his name? Pius? Pope
Leo.
I can't remember. Pope Leo, yeah. Well, listen, Leo, you better, perform out there because I'm hot on your tail.
What would be your papal name?
It's an interesting question. It probably would be, I think I'd just go with Pope Dan the First.
You just choose your regular name?
Yeah. Listen, why do I need to pretend to be somebody I'm not?
Well,
I'm
similarly, I think I'm just going to be Pope J, just the letter J.
Really, J?
Pope J 1,
Yeah.
numeral 1, not Roman numeral, regular numeral
just the number 1. Oh,
J1.
yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, I'm just gonna let the what do they call it when all the
conclave,
bigwigs, the conclave.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna for future attendees of the conclave, like our hats are in the ring, our papal hats are in the ring. Just FYI.
Yeah. Maybe the issue is I'm not looking the part. I'm not wearing the, they say dress for the job you want. Right? Maybe I should start dressing like the Pope.
I think you should, because I think then, people will immediately be like, oh, have you seen that dude that he looks like he's wearing like the Pope outfit? Then they'll just start to refer to you as the Pope because they don't know your real name. And then you get enough people who are like, oh yeah, they're like, oh, who's the Pope? And it'll be like, oh, it's that guy. So that's that's
a good plan. All right. So let's go back to White Rosary for a second. I want to talk about the music here, because we kind of dropped off after the lyrics. So you pointed this out. I completely agree. The first 3 tracks of this record really slowly build that emotional intensity. And this is, I think, absolutely the apex of that emotional intensity in the solo section. There's kind of this first solo section, right? And if you go back to Judge, I've forgotten his name, Judge Ken. If you go back to his assertion and your agreement, 2 EPs here. This is definitely kind of the part of the solo EP section, but it's the emotional kind of apex, right?
Yeah, I would think so. It sounds the most anguished.
Yeah. I have nothing else really to comment on in the
only thing
in the music here.
The only thing I will say is that he, for most of the record so far, he's been in his lower register, his like quiet whispered, and this is the first song where he, I think is it on the second verse? He jumps to his upper register, and it's noticeable, like. It caught my ear just because it's the first time really on the album that he has jumped to that register, and it was welcome to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is an intense song, but Jay William, it is not as intense as the last song on side A. Do you want to move on to it?
Yes, let's.
Okay. All right, final song on side A, If I Had a Gun, 4 minutes and 16 seconds. Why don't we delve in?
Abandoning the wind and the sun. If I had a gun, I know what I would do. I would seal my fate. Seal my fate with you.
Okay, we're going to have to grapple with some things in these lyrics. I will start off, first verse here, feels to me a little bit like we're back to an Engine era kind of childhood memory. I'm not certain about that, but that was the feeling I had. Could this be about his mom again? Could this be back to the Mark singing about his kind of missing, emotionally distant mother?
Well, some background on this song that I learned from the Sean Body book is that apparently Eitzel was asked to contribute music to, I forget if it was like a theatrical production or something along those lines. And somebody told him that they wanted it to be like Sugar Mountain by Neil Young.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to, and he listened to Sugar Mountain, and, you know, he thought that that was a great song about like childhood. And so he was trying to, you know, intentionally write from like a childhood perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know whether this is, you know, specifically about, you know, his family, his childhood, not sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I assumed, and I do vaguely remember that from reading the book, but I mean, listen, I assumed these lyrics clearly are very raw. Now, he could be following some narrative that we're not aware of, but I just assumed that this is coming kind of from his, you know, his own feelings.
Sure.
And, you know, I just kind of, there's a couple of lines in here. If you look at verse 2, do you stand with God's finest, laughing in the gallows, abandoned in the wind and the sun? Like, I don't know. There was just a few things that I maybe felt like, gosh, this song feels to me as though he's singing to a dead person with whom he has a close relationship. And then obviously we've got to talk about this chorus, right? This chorus, musically, I want to set it aside for a second. We'll get to the music, but you've got to acknowledge, I mean, this chorus is as blunt and dark as really any Eitzel lyrics have gotten to date. Definitely uncomfortably dark. And almost dark to a level that is distracting. I would actually say that's, I mean, if I'm being honest, it's the kind of song that if I put on and somebody was in the car with me, I'd feel awkward. Does that make sense? Because it's just a bit too dark. It's like, ooh, God, you know, if I had a gun, I know what I would do. I would seal my fate with you. I mean, that's a little on the nose. And, you know, it's just a level of dark that is severely dark.
Yes. Very dark. You know, at the same time, there's something about the atmosphere of this song that I feel like this is like sort of him tapping into Springsteenian sort of. It's darker than even the darkest Springsteen, I would say, but it feels similar to some of the other stuff on the Lover's Leap. You know, this is the first song on the album that has any kind of rhythmic thing going. It's got the like the kick drum. Yeah. It sounds like a loop. Very sparse. And then also I think this is the first appearance of Kid Congo Powers playing the Voodoo-esque feedback howls in the background. Sean Body says in his book that there was a different version of this song recorded with his 60-watt collaborators.
Oh, really?
It was going to be the B-side. They were going to put out South End on Sea as a single, and that version of this song. So this song had been kicking around for a while, but obviously, you know, he re-recorded it for the one that's on this album here. But Sean Body has like a top 10 list at the end of the book that has like his favorite AMC songs and then his favorite unreleased. And this is like number 3 on like the unreleased one, you know, not the version that's on the album. He did not like this version. Yeah. I've
not heard the unreleased one.
I haven't either. You know, but this version is quite attention getting, you know, like it's, you know, about as dark as it gets.
It is. How much black? No more. It's no more black. You remember that from Spinal Tap? None more black. It is extremely dark, but I will say musically, this is one of my favorite songs on the album. I've already said what makes me uncomfortable about this. Like, this is not a song that I feel like I could put on a mix that I sent to anyone or pop on at a, you know what I mean? Like
you're not gonna woo anybody with this song on a mix.
No. And yeah, you may in fact have the police called on you if you were to include this on a mix and send it to someone. But
it's possible.
This is a song that I absolutely encourage everyone to appreciate with headphones in for yourself, because musically I think it's beautiful. You've already brought up the Kid Congo Powers guitar part and that very simple percussion here. It elevates this song perfectly. It doesn't do too much at all, but it somehow brings it to another level. And I'll kind of say that I think that this is the most perfectly crafted pop song on the album, meaning the structure of the song and the sing-along ability of it, basically. I think it is. This is the peak on this record. If you kind of take the lyrics aside for a second, it's just a very easy chorus to sing along. It is literally it's verse, chorus, bridge, solo, chorus in this song, which is about as kind of standard as you can get when you think of a pop rock song. So it makes sense. It's been kicking around. It's been massaged over some period of time, but I gotta say, I think this song is a close to a 10. I think the only reason I may say a 9 is it's not that I don't like the lyrics of the chorus. I just feel embarrassed.
They make you feel funny, in a unpleasant way.
Just too blunt. All right, so Jay Williams.
Sorry,
anything
I had a
else
beer
you
overflow
want
there?
Well, listen, it happens. Another podcasting accident.
No, I mean, I think we've said enough about this. Kid Congo's guitar playing. I love there is a bridge section on this where he does this like face melting.
Yeah.
Ebo dissonance thing. It's like this controlled like feedback. Yeah. But it's a really cool choice, I think, just with the sparseness of the rest of the song. It's an interesting one to end side one on because, but it's the best bridge into the full band stuff, because this one is like not quite full band, but it's adding elements.
All right. Well, at the end of episode 2, at the end of our episode where we cover side 2 here, side B, we should really talk about what the 2 EPs are. Maybe the Jay William retracking of the Backtracking will be in play there. We can discuss that. Is that something you can promise us?
Yeah, I can definitely identify where I would split the songs.
Okay. So with that, then I guess we should just call it an episode. That is the end of side A of Caught in a Trap, and I can't back out because I love you too much, baby. Jay William, as always, thank you. Why don't you tell him what to do?
You have to smash the subscribe button in whatever podcast listening format platform you may be using. You should give a 5-star only review, unless the scale is 10 stars, and then it gets a 10.
That's right. That's
5
right.
plus
That's
5
right.
is 10.
Yeah. And why don't they follow us on social media? You can go to Twitter at BacktrackingRocksRox. You can go to Instagram at BacktrackingRocksRox. You can even go to Reddit and just join the American Music Club subreddit. You will find us there. Or you can send us a DM, as the kids say. We are /BacktrackingRocksRox on Reddit. And finally, Jay William.
Are you gonna slide into our DMs? Is that what they do?
Listen, they slide. I've never had a DM slide in all my years. I think I'm just too old. I'm just too old to have a DM slide. I'm at the age where the DM slides don't happen. The slick kitchen floor slides happen, and you end up in the fucking ER with a brain bleed.
That's right.
You know,
those kind of slides can be deadly.
Well, listen, it is much more deadly and much less exciting than a DM slide, from what I understand from the kids. But I guess I'll never know. Too old, they say.
Too old to can't teach old dogs new tricks.
That's right. So, speaking of old, why don't you just contact us in the method that we most prefer, which is email, backtrackingrox,
yeah,
at gmail.com. Just do it that way. Do the reviews, share it with friends, do all of the things that you're supposed to do on the internet, so that, for God's sake, the algorithm surfaces us first. I want us to be surfaced before all the big podcasts out there. I want us to show up when you're searching for This American Life. I want Backtracking to show up. When you're searching for your Joe Rogan, Backtracking. When you're looking for Pod Save America, Backtracking. I don't care. I don't give a fuck what you're looking for. I want Backtracking to show up.
As soon as you start to type in a letter, like first letter, and it comes, the first thing that should pop up will be Backtracking. That will only happen if you, dear listeners, give us 5-star reviews over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's right. So we will be back next week. Side B of Caught in a Trap, Jay William. I can't wait to see where this journey takes us.
We are still caught within the trap of this album.
Yeah, that's right. So, listeners, have a great week. Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.